Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into something incredibly complex, the high-stakes negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. We're going to break down all the moving parts, and we'll be using the really sharp analysis from diplomat Ghassan Salame as our guide.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at how these talks even got started, because that's a story in itself. Then we'll dig into what each side really wants. After that, we'll analyze the true balance of power, which isn't as simple as it looks. We'll also get into the super sensitive issue of Hezbollah. And finally, we'll zoom out and see how this whole local crisis is actually a symptom of a much bigger global problem.
So first up, why now? How did we even get to a point where these negotiations are happening in Washington? I mean, it's pretty surprising, and it turns out there isn't one simple answer.
Well, according to Ghassan Salamé's analysis, you've basically got two different stories that actually complement each other. The Lebanese version is that their president was just fed up with a ceasefire that wasn't being honored, so he pushed for these direct talks. Then you have the U.S. and Israeli perspective, which is that they deliberately created this special separate track for negotiations. And Salamé's point is, you know what, both of these things are probably true.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. You have to look at the two different hats America's wearing. In the wider regional discussions that involve Iran, the U.S. is right in the mix, a direct participant, basically a belligerent. But here, in these specific talks, it's suddenly playing the role of the formal, neutral mediator between Lebanon and Israel. That switch in roles is absolutely fundamental to understanding what's going on.
So that leads us straight to our second point, which is where you can see all the complexity really building. At the absolute heart of these talks is a major clash of goals. I mean, they are fundamentally different. You just can't get why there's so much friction unless you understand this. And this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? It perfectly shows the core problem. You've got the three main parties, and they all walked into the same room wanting completely different outcomes. The U.S. is shooting for the moon, a huge, comprehensive peace deal. Israel's main objective? To get Hezbollah disarmed, and they want Lebanon's help to do it. And Lebanon? They're just trying to rewind the clock and get back to the conditions of a past ceasefire. So right off the bat, they're not even speaking the same language.
And you know, for Lebanon, it goes way beyond just that ceasefire. They've come with a whole shopping list of demands. We're talking about the release of prisoners, a total Israeli withdrawal from every inch of their territory, and a final, definitive end to all these violations of their sovereignty, whether it's by air, sea, or land. This is their agenda, and it's very different from what the U.S. or Israel is focused on.
Okay, so this brings us to a really crucial point, understanding the real power dynamics at play here. Because if you just look at it on the surface, it seems like a total mismatch. But as we're about to see, it is way, way more complicated than that.
And let's be real, on paper, the gap is just huge. Israel's military is a technological powerhouse. We're talking about an advanced air force, incredible mobilization capabilities, things that Lebanon just can't compete with. It's an enormous imbalance.
But, and this is so important, Ghassan Salamé offers this critical piece of wisdom. He says there's a world of difference between military domination and political hegemony. Just because you have the bigger army doesn't automatically mean you win the political game. They are not the same thing at all.
And you only have to look at recent history to see he's right. I mean, think about Russia and Ukraine, a massive military, yet it hasn't translated into the quick win they were hoping for. Or look at the U.S. campaign against Iran. So much pressure, yet the regime proved to be way more resilient than anyone thought. It just goes to show you that sheer force isn't always the game changer you'd think it is.
Which leads us right into the biggest internal hurdle for Lebanon, the one that complicates absolutely everything, the future of Hezbollah's weapons. This is, without a doubt, the most sensitive, most difficult issue on the entire table.
And it all boils down to this one giant question that hangs over everything, not just these talks, but Lebanon's entire future. How do you deal with Hezbollah's military wing? How do you disarm them? And believe me, there are no easy answers here.
Salame lays out two possible roads forward. The first is, well, the optimal one, the fairy tale scenario, really. It's where you somehow persuade Hezbollah's leadership that having their own army is now hurting their cause, and they just voluntarily give up their arms. Then there's the more realistic and much harder path. This involves a long, slow grind of political pressure mixed with persuasion, all while trying your best not to tip the country into a civil war.
And it's so important to understand the very tricky position the Lebanese state is in. For Israel, it's simple. Hezbollah is the enemy, full stop. But for the Lebanese state, it's a political party. A party whose military actions right now are illegal, yes, but also a group that many remember for its role in liberating South Lebanon. that history, that nuance, it makes a simple black and white approach pretty much impossible.
So now let's pull the camera back and look at the really big picture, because this regional mess, it's not happening in a vacuum. Ghassan Salame argues that it's actually a symptom of something much bigger, a global system that's starting to fracture.
So why should this matter to the rest of us? Well, because smaller countries like Lebanon absolutely depend on international law. They need a stable world where there are rules, and those rules are respected. But when the big, powerful countries start breaking those rules whenever they feel like it, the whole system that keeps things stable starts to fall apart.
And we're seeing the signs of this decay everywhere, aren't we? The UN Security Council is often totally paralyzed. You've got superpowers just deciding to launch wars of choice. Even some of the most basic, foundational rules, like freedom of the seas, are being torn up in critical places like the Strait of Hormuz. This is the shaky, unstable world where all these talks are trying to happen.
And so that leaves us here at the ultimate impasse. Salame really puts it perfectly. The current situation, it just can't go on. It's totally untenable. But at the same time, a full-scale war is completely unsustainable for everybody involved. Which brings us to the biggest, most profound question of all. If staying put is impossible and going to war is unthinkable, is there another option? Is there a third way? And what in the world would that even look like?